The Arizona sun beat mercilessly on the parched earth as Catherine Morgan pressed her back against the rough barnwood, her father's shouts echoing from the main house. Blood stained her split lip, and her ribs ached where his fist had connected. 3 days. That's how long she had until he forced her to marry Harlan Wade, the banker's cruel son who'd already broken 2 horses and a saloon girl's arm. Her mother's silver locket, the only thing she had left of the woman who died bringing her into this harsh world, hung heavy around her neck. Catherine's fingers closed around it. Perhaps she could trade it in town for enough money to disappear, though she knew it would buy her barely a week's survival. The decision crystallized as her father's boots stomped across the porch. She would run, tonight. Even death in the desert seemed gentler than Harlan's promised brutality. Before we continue this journey together, I'd love to ask you to take just a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. Your support is incredibly important to us. It motivates us to bring you more quality stories of love, courage, and adventure from the frontier. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story right now? Let me know in the comments. That evening, as twilight painted the mesas purple and gold, Catherine slipped through the cottonwoods along the creek bed. She'd made it perhaps 3 miles when she heard the groan, low, pained, distinctly human. Every instinct screamed to keep running, but her feet stopped of their own accord. He lay half-concealed in sagebrush, dark hair matted with blood, bronze skin torn by what looked like rifle fire across his shoulder and side. Apache, she knew immediately, from the beadwork on his buckskin pants, the turquoise stone hanging from his neck, the strong lines of his face that spoke of the mountains and desert rather than settlements. He couldn't have been more than 25. The pain aged him in the fading light. His eyes opened, black as obsidian, fever bright, and fixed on her with an intensity that should have frightened her. Instead, Catherine found herself kneeling beside him, her own escape forgotten. "You're dying," she whispered. "Yes." His English surprised her, accented but clear. "Leave me, they'll blame you." But Catherine was already tearing strips from her petticoat, her hands moving with the efficiency her mother had taught her before fever claimed her. "My father will blame me, whether you live or die. I've got nothing left to lose." The corner of his mouth quirked, despite the agony etched in his features. Foolish white girl. Foolish Apache warrior who got himself shot. She pressed cloth to the worst wound, and he hissed through his teeth. "What's your name?" "Dakota." His hand, large, calloused, shaking, gripped her wrist with surprising strength. "You risk much." "So do you, letting me touch you." Catherine met his gaze steadily. "We're both gambling tonight." She couldn't move him far, but she managed to drag him deeper into the brush, to a small cave carved by ancient waters into the sandstone cliff. Her father wouldn't search for her until morning, wouldn't think to look beyond the immediate area. She had time, not much, but enough. Through that long night, Catherine worked by moonlight streaming through the cave entrance. She cleaned his wounds with water from her canteen, used the last of her whiskey to sterilize them, earning another sharp intake of breath from Dakota, and bound them with torn fabric. His fever burned hot enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Why?" he asked once, during a lucid moment near dawn. Catherine paused, her hands gentle on his chest as she checked his bindings. "Because no one should die alone. Because you looked at me like I was a person, not property." She laughed bitterly. "Because maybe saving you saves me too, somehow." Dakota's fingers brushed her cheek, Featherlight. You are stronger than you know, golden hair. Catherine, she corrected softly. My name is Catherine. Catrine. He shaped the syllables carefully, making them sound almost musical. I am Dakota, of the Chiricahua, son of the wind and the mountain. Pleased to make your acquaintance, despite the circumstances. The formality of it struck them both as absurd, and despite everything, the blood, the danger, the impossible situation, they smiled. By the second day, Catherine knew she couldn't return home. Her father would have discovered her absence, and Harlan would be riding with him, eager to assert his ownership. The thought made her stomach turn. She gathered what food she could from the land. Prickly pear fruit, wild onions, roots her mother had taught her to identify. It wasn't much, but Dakota needed to regain his strength. You should go, he told her on the third morning, his fever finally broken, clarity returning to those dark eyes. Your people will be searching. Let them search. Catherine was washing his wounds with water she'd hauled from the creek, noting with relief that the inflammation was receding. I told you, I have nothing to return to. Your father, beats me, promised me to a man who'll do worse. The words came flat, emotionless, but her hands trembled slightly as she worked. I was running away when I found you. The only difference now is I have a reason to hide instead of just flee. Dakota caught her hand, drawing her gaze to his. What did you plan to trade for your freedom? Slowly, Catherine drew out the locket. In the cave's dim light, the silver caught and held the morning sun. My mother's. It's all I have of value. His expression shifted, something fierce and protective crossing his features. And you would have sold your heart for a few days of survival? Better than giving my life to Harlan Wade. But even as she said it, the truth of what she'd almost lost struck her. This locket held the last physical connection to the woman who'd loved her, who'd whispered stories and sang lullabies and told her she was worthy of kindness. Keep it. Dakota's voice was firm, despite his weakness. Some things are too precious for trading. What? You need to survive, yes. He struggled to sit up, and Catherine moved to help him, her shoulder fitting naturally under his good arm. The desert provides for those who know her language. You save my life, Catherine. I will save yours by making you strong enough that you never need to trade your treasures for mere existence. Something in Catherine's chest cracked open, not breaking, but blooming. Why would you do that? Because you looked at me and saw a person worth saving. Because your hands were gentle even when they caused pain. Because, he paused, seeming to search for words. Because the spirits brought us together in that moment, and I do not question such gifts. Over the following days, as Dakota healed and Catherine hid, an unlikely partnership formed. He taught her to move silently through the brush, to identify tracks and read the stories they told, to find water where she saw only rock. She taught him English phrases he didn't know, shared stories of her mother, learned to anticipate his needs before he voiced them. Your father, Dakota said one evening as they watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of copper and gold. He is a hard man? Catherine drew her knees to her chest. He wasn't always. When Mother was alive, he laughed sometimes. But she died, and he started drinking, and somewhere along the way, he decided I was to blame for her death. She touched her ribs unconsciously. Or maybe he just needed something to hit. Dakota's jaw tightened, but his voice remained gentle. Among my people, a man who strikes a woman is considered weak. No strength, no honor, only fear. Among mine, a woman who speaks against her father is considered wicked. Catherine's smile was sad. Different worlds, same injustice. Perhaps. He turned to study her profile, noting the stubborn set of her chin, the quiet determination in her eyes. Or perhaps we make our own world, you and I. The words hung between them, heavy with possibility and danger. They'll hang you if they catch us together, Catherine whispered. My father, Harlan, they'll call you a savage who stole me. They won't care about the truth. And they'll call you fallen, ruined, worse than dead. Dakota's response was equally quiet. I know the risk, golden hair. Do you? Catherine met his gaze fully then, seeing the question beneath the question. I know, and I'm more afraid of going back than I am of staying. His hand found hers in the gathering darkness, rough palm against smooth. Then we go forward, together. Together, she echoed, the word tasting like a promise. But the desert, for all its harsh beauty, held dangers beyond Catherine's sheltered experience. On the 10th day, as she returned from checking her snares, she heard voices, her father's among them, and Harlan's crueler tones. She's out here somewhere, Harlan was saying. Probably dead in a wash, but we need to find the body. Can't have people saying I couldn't keep track of my own fiancé. That girl's always been more trouble than she's worth, her father slurred, clearly drunk even at midday. Should have married her off years ago. Catherine's heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. She was perhaps 50 yards from the cave, but they were moving in that direction, searching methodically. If they found Dakota, she burst into the cave, breathless. They're coming, close, we have to... But Dakota was already moving. Pain be damned, gathering their meager supplies with practiced efficiency. How many? 6, maybe 7. My father, Harlan, some ranch hands. Her voice shook, but her hands were steady as she helped him. Dakota, you can't run yet. The wounds. I can run far enough. His eyes met hers with fierce determination. And I will not let them take you back to that. They made it perhaps a mile before Catherine heard the shout of discovery. The riders had found the cave, found evidence of their presence. Within minutes, the thunder of hoofbeats echoed off the canyon walls. Go, Catherine gasped, her lungs burning. You're faster without me. They want me, not you. Go! Dakota pulled her behind a rock formation, his face close to hers, breathing hard. I will not abandon you. Not to them. Not ever. His thumb brushed her cheek, wiping away tears she hadn't realized were falling. You are not property, Catherine. You are a person. You are worth fighting for. I'm a stranger here, she sobbed. The weight of everything, the fear, the running, the impossible situation, crashing down on her. I don't belong anywhere. I don't fit in your world or mine. Dakota's hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. In them, she saw not pity, but certainty, fierce and unshakable. You belong in my arms, and nowhere else. The words struck her like lightning, illuminating something she'd been too afraid to name. But there was no time to respond. The riders were nearly upon them. Stay here, Dakota commanded, moving to confront their pursuers. No, Catherine grabbed his arm. They'll kill you. Perhaps. His smile was grim. But I am Chiricahua. We do not surrender what is ours without blood. What happened next would be burned into Catherine's memory forever. Dakota stepped into the open, drawing the rifle he'd retrieved from the cave, the one that had been used to shoot him, ironically recovered by Catherine days earlier. He fired once, deliberately high, but the message was clear. Harlan's voice rang out, ugly with rage. That's her! The savage has her. She came willingly, Dakota called back, his English clear and proud. She is not yours to claim. Catherine, her father's shout was slurred but commanding. Get away from that animal, now! Every fiber of Catherine's being wanted to hide, to cower, to submit as she'd been trained to do her entire life. Instead, she stepped out beside Dakota, her hand finding his free one and gripping it tight. No, father. The word, simple, small, 2 letters, felt like the bravest thing she'd ever said. Harlan's face purpled. You filthy little, you've let him touch you. You're ruined, worthless. I saved his life, Catherine called back, her voice gaining strength, and he gave me mine back. That's worth more than any marriage you could have forced on me. I'll kill him, Harlan snarled, raising his pistol. I'll kill him and drag you home where you belong. Time seemed to slow. Catherine saw Harlan's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Dakota's body shift to shield her, and something inside her snapped. Not broke, but transformed. She was done being small, done being afraid. Her hand shot to Dakota's belt, drawing the knife she'd watched him sharpen daily. In one fluid motion, she threw it, not at Harlan, but at his gun hand. The blade struck true, and the pistol fell from his grip as he howled in pain. The ranch hand's horses spooked at the sudden movement and Harlan's scream, creating chaos. In the confusion, Catherine heard a sound that made her blood run cold. More hoofbeats from a different direction. More riders cresting the ridge. But these riders wore no hats. Their hair flew free, dark and long, and their war cries echoed off the canyon walls. My brothers, Dakota breathed, relief and pride mixing in his voice. The Chiricahua warriors descended like vengeful spirits. Their presence alone, enough to send her father's drunk companions fleeing. But Harlan, stubborn and stupid with rage, grabbed for his dropped pistol with his uninjured hand. Dakota moved with speed that belied his healing wounds, his rifle aimed steady at Harlan's chest. Touch that gun and die. You can't have her. Harlan spat blood and venom. She's white. She's ours. She's free, Dakota interrupted, his voice dropping to something deadly, and you will never touch her again. The standoff lasted an eternity compressed into seconds. Finally, Catherine's father, coward that he was, grabbed Harlan's good arm and dragged him toward the horses. She's dead to us anyway, he muttered. Let her rot with the savages. As they fled, Catherine felt something loosen in her chest. Not grief. She'd mourned the father he could have been long ago. But release. The chains that had bound her to that life, to those expectations, fell away like shed skin. One of the Apache warriors, older, bearing the scars of many battles, rode forward. His eyes assessed Catherine with sharp intelligence before turning to Dakota, speaking in rapid Apache that she couldn't follow. Dakota responded in kind, his hand never leaving Catherine's. The conversation went back and forth, and Catherine caught the sideways glances, the questions in their eyes as they looked at her. She stood straighter, meeting their gazes with what she hoped was respectful courage. Finally, the older warrior nodded and addressed her in halting English. You save him. Yes, Catherine answered clearly. Why? It was the same question Dakota had asked that first night. Catherine's answer was simpler now, distilled to its essence. Because it was right. Because he needed help. Because, she glanced at Dakota, saw his slight nod of encouragement. Because my heart knew him before my mind did. The warrior's stern face cracked into something that might have been a smile. He spoke again in Apache, and this time Takota's response was longer, impassioned. The warrior listened, then laughed, a sound like thunder rolling across the desert, and said something that made Takota flush slightly. "What did he say?" Catherine whispered. "That the spirits have a sense of humor, giving a Chiricahua warrior a white woman with the courage of a mountain cat." Takota's hand squeezed hers. "His name is Kele, my mother's brother. He says, if you truly wish to walk this path, you must understand what you leave behind. The white world will close its doors to you. My people," he hesitated, "my people may not welcome you easily. You will be between worlds, Catherine." "I'm a stranger here," Catherine said softly, echoing her earlier words. But this time, she smiled. "In this desert, in that life I left, the only place I'm not a stranger is beside you." Takota's face transformed, joy breaking through like sunrise. He turned to Kelly and spoke rapidly, and the older warrior nodded, serious now. He began what sounded like a formal speech, gesturing to the sky, the earth, the other warriors. "He's telling them our story," Takota translated quietly. "He says you are brave, that you have proven yourself worthy of respect, but you must prove yourself worthy of the tribe." He met her eyes. "Will you come with us? Learn our ways. It will be hard, Catherine. Harder than anything you've known." Catherine thought of the cave, of Takota's fevered skin under her hands, of the gentle way he'd touched her mother's locket. She thought of his words, "You belong in my arms, and nowhere else." "Teach me," she said simply. The journey to the Chiricahua camp took 3 days. Catherine rode behind Takota on one of the warrior's horses, her arms around his waist, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing. At night, they camped under stars so bright and numerous they took her breath away. Takota would lie beside her, respectfully distant, but close enough that she could hear his heartbeat, and name the constellations in both Apache and English. "That one," he said the second night, pointing to a cluster of stars, "we call Coyote's Tail." He scattered the stars across the sky when he was running from his own tricks. Catherine laughed softly. "We call it the Big Dipper. Use it to find north. See, already you know something useful." His voice was warm with approval. "You will learn more. How to tan hides, to make pemmican, to read the wind. My Aunt Desba will teach you. She is fierce, but fair." "More fierce than facing down Harlan with your knife?" Catherine teased, surprising herself with her own lightness. Takota rolled toward her, propping himself on one elbow. In the starlight, his face was all plains and shadows, beautiful in its strength. "That was the bravest thing I've ever seen a woman do. Foolish, maybe, but brave. I couldn't let him hurt you." The admission felt enormous. "I know." His fingers found a lock of her hair, tangling gently in the golden strands. "Catherine, I must tell you something. Among my people, when a warrior brings a woman to the tribe, it means he intends to make her his wife." "Do you understand what I'm saying?" Catherine's breath caught. "You want to marry me?" "I want to build a life with you. I want to wake to your face and sleep knowing you are safe. I want to teach our children to be as brave as their mother." He paused, vulnerability showing through his confidence. "But I will not claim you as property, as your father and that man tried to do. You must choose freely. You must want this life, want me, or we are nothing." For a moment, Catherine couldn't speak around the emotion clogging her throat. This man, this warrior who'd been near death when she found him, who taught her to survive, who'd stood beside her when the world she knew came calling, was offering her not a cage, but a partnership. "I choose you," she whispered. "I choose this life. I choose to belong to myself and with you." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Teach me to be Chiricahua, Dakota. Teach me to be yours." His kiss was gentle, reverent, tasting of starlight and possibility. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright. "Then we marry in the traditional way, when we reach the camp, and you will truly be mine as I am truly yours." The camp, when they reached it, was nothing like Catherine had imagined. Wickiups made of brush and hide dotted a canyon floor where water ran clear and cold. Children played and laughed. Women worked and called to one another. Men sat in groups, talking and repairing weapons. It looked, Catherine realized with surprise, like home, like community, like belonging. But her arrival created a stir. Heads turned, conversations stopped. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes assessing her, judging her. An older woman, wrinkled as dried fruit, but with eyes sharp as obsidian, approached. She circled Catherine slowly, then spoke in rapid Apache. "My Aunt Desba," Dakota said. "She asks why I bring a white girl to our fires." Before he could answer, Catherine stepped forward and addressed the old woman directly. "Because I saved his life, because he saved mine, because I wish to learn your ways and earn my place here." She kept her voice respectful but firm, refusing to show the fear churning in her stomach. Desba's eyes narrowed. Then, without warning, she grabbed Catherine's hands, turning them over to inspect the calluses forming on her palms, the dirt under her nails, the healing blisters from gathering wood. She spoke again, and this time her tone was different, testing rather than hostile. "She says your hands show work, not weakness," Dakota translated. "But work is not enough. Can you suffer? Can you endure? Can you become Chiricahua in your heart, not just your actions?" Catherine met Desba's gaze steadily. "I endured my father's fists and a forced marriage. I ran into the desert with nothing. I cleaned wounds and hunted food and learned to track. I stood against armed men to protect someone I—" She stopped, swallowed, started again. "Someone I love. I can endure whatever you ask of me." The camp had gone silent. Even the children stopped playing to watch this strange white woman standing before their elder, declaring her strength. Desba studied her for a long moment. Then she did something Catherine didn't expect. She smiled, revealing gaps where teeth had been. She spoke, and this time Dakota's translation was accompanied by his own barely suppressed grin. "She says you have the spirit of a she-wolf, stubborn, fierce when threatened, good for making strong cubs." He laughed at Catherine's blush. "She will teach you. But first, we must make you Chiricahua in truth." What followed was 3 months of the hardest work Catherine had ever known. Desba was a relentless teacher, accepting nothing less than perfection. Catherine learned to scrape hides until her arms ached, to sew with sinew until her fingers bled, to grind corn until her back screamed protest. She learned to gather the right plants for medicine, to preserve meat against the winter, to weave baskets so tight they held water. But she also learned joy. She learned to laugh with the other women as they worked, to play with the children who quickly overcame their shyness, to sit by fires and listen to stories that stretched back generations. She learned the language, slowly, painfully, one word at a time, until Apache began to shape itself in her mouth almost naturally. And she learned Dakota, learned that he was respected for his hunting skill and wisdom beyond his years. Learned that he'd lost his father to soldiers when he was 12, his mother to fever 2 winters past. Learned that he sang softly when he thought no one was listening, that he could track a rabbit through solid rock, or so it seemed, that he worried about the future of his people with a depth that made her heart ache. They couldn't be alone often. Propriety was as strict among the Chiricahua as among whites, if differently expressed, but they found moments. A walk to fetch water, a ride to check hunting grounds, sitting together at the evening fires, their shoulders touching, just enough to feel each other's warmth. One evening, 3 months after her arrival, Desba announced that Catherine had learned enough. The old woman's declaration came during the communal dinner, loud enough for all to hear. "What does that mean?" Catherine asked Dakota quietly. His hand found hers in the firelight, threading their fingers together. "It means you are ready for the ceremony, for us." The wedding ceremony was unlike anything Catherine had known. No church, no preacher, no formal vows. Instead, at dawn, Dakota came to Desba's wickiup, where Catherine had been staying. He wore his finest buckskins, his long hair bound with leather and feathers, his face painted with symbols she'd learned meant protection and prosperity. He carried a blanket, beautiful, woven by his mother years ago, blue and white and red. Without words, he wrapped it around Catherine's shoulders, then drew her close so they were both covered by it. In that moment, standing in the cool morning air with the blanket cocooning them, they were declared married by the act itself. But Kale spoke words over them anyway, his voice carrying to the gathered tribe. Dakota translated in whispers against her ear. "He says we are 2 souls made one. 2 paths become 1 trail. 2 hearts beat with 1 drum. He says the spirits blessed our meeting and bless our joining." Dakota's voice grew thick with emotion. "He says you are Chiricahua now, in all ways that matter. You are my wife. I am your husband. We are together, as was always meant to be." Catherine turned within the blanket's embrace to face him fully. "Together," she whispered. The word that had become their promise, their prayer, their truth. The kiss that sealed their marriage was witnessed by the entire tribe. And when they finally broke apart, the women were ululating with joy, and the men were calling out approvals and teasing remarks that made Dakota flush and grin. That night, in their own wickiup, built by Dakota with help from other warriors, a home of their own, Catherine lay in her husband's arms and felt the last piece of her old self fall away. She wasn't Catherine Morgan anymore, daughter of a drunk and property of no man. She was just Catherine, beloved of Dakota, member of the Chiricahua, belonging to herself and to him. "Are you happy?" Dakota asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I didn't know happiness was possible," Catherine admitted. "I thought survival was the best I could hope for." And now, she raised herself on one elbow to look at him, this man who changed everything. "Now I know the difference between existing and living. You taught me that." His hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness. "You taught me that the heart recognizes its home before the mind does. That love is not about possession, but partnership. That courage comes in many forms, and sometimes the bravest thing is to be gentle." "Go slow," Catherine whispered, suddenly nervous despite their marriage, despite everything. "It hurts to feel this much, to love this much. What if I lose you?" You won't. Dakota's certainty was absolute. I will die before I hurt you, Catherine, and I will live to love you every day I'm given. That is my vow to you, witnessed by the spirits and the stars. Their lovemaking that night was tender, unhurried, full of whispered words in two languages that meant the same thing. Mine, beloved, home. When Catherine cried, Dakota kissed away her tears and held her until she believed, truly believed, that she was safe, that she was loved, that she belonged. The years that followed were not easy. The white world pressed ever closer, soldiers and settlers alike pushing into Apache lands. There were battles, losses, grief that cut deep, but through it all, Catherine and Dakota remained steadfast, two halves of a whole, partners in every sense. Catherine became known among the Chiricahua as Golden Hair Who Sees Far, for her ability to read weather and seasons, to anticipate needs before they became urgent. She bore 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, who grew up speaking both Apache and English, belonging to both worlds and neither, making their own path forward. Desba lived long enough to teach Catherine's daughter the old ways, to approve of the woman her nephew had chosen. Before she died, the old woman took Catherine's hand and said in English, "Good choice. You, good woman. Good Chiricahua." "Thank you," Catherine had whispered, "for giving me the chance to prove it." On the 20th anniversary of the day Catherine found Dakota bleeding in the sagebrush, they climbed to a high mesa overlooking the canyon where the camp had once stood. The tribe had moved many times since then, always ahead of the pressing white tide, but this place remained special. Dakota's hair was threaded with silver now, his face lined by sun and wind and laughter. Catherine's golden hair had darkened. Her hands were calloused and strong, her body marked by childbirth and work and the passage of time. But when he looked at her, she saw the same wonder she'd seen that first night in the cave. "Do you remember," he asked, pulling her close, "when you said you were a stranger, that you belonged nowhere?" Catherine rested her head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of him, sage and leather and home. "I remember, and I remember what you told me, that you belonged in my arms and nowhere else." He kissed the top of her head. "Was I right, my wife? After all these years, all these struggles, was I right?" She tilted her face up to his, seeing their life together written in his eyes. The fear and the courage, the pain and the healing, the love that had transformed them both. "You were right," she said simply. "I belong exactly where I am, with you, in this life we've built. I'm not a stranger anymore, Dakota. I'm home." His kiss tasted of joy and tears and promises kept. Behind them, the sun set over the desert in shades of gold and copper and red, painting the world in colors that had no names in English or Apache, only in the language of the heart. They stood together, wrapped in each other and the blanket that had married them 2 decades past, and watched the stars emerge one by one. The same stars that had witnessed their beginning, that would witness whatever endings and new beginnings the future held. Together. Always together. And that, more than anything else, was the truest belonging of all. The winter of Catherine's 2nd year with the Chiricahua brought snow that painted the canyon white, and cold that bit through even the thickest blankets. She was 4 months pregnant with their first child, her belly just beginning to show beneath the buckskin dress Desba had helped her make. Dakota had become more protective than ever, hovering whenever she moved, insisting she rest when she wanted to work. "I'm with child, not dying," Catherine laughed one morning as he tried to stop her from carrying water. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. Not my woman carrying my child." His hands settled on her waist, drawing her back against his chest. "I will not risk you, Katerine." She turned in his arms, seeing the fear he tried to hide. "Your mother," she said softly, understanding. "You're afraid I'll be like your mother." Dakota's jaw tightened. The fever took her, but childbirth nearly killed her twice before that. "I cannot—" His voice broke. "I cannot lose you." Catherine's hands cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You won't. I'm strong, Dakota. You taught me that. And Desba knows every herb, every prayer, every trick for bringing babies safely into this world." She pressed her forehead to his. "Have faith in me." "I have faith." He pulled her closer, one hand splaying protectively over her belly. But fear doesn't listen to faith. That fear proved prescient 3 days later when riders appeared on the ridge. Not Apache, but cavalry soldiers, their blue uniforms stark against the white snow. Catherine was grinding corn with the other women when the alarm went up. Within moments, the camp transformed from peaceful community to defensive fortress. Dakota found her immediately, his rifle in hand, his face grim. "Take the children to the hidden canyon, now." "I won't leave you." "You will." His voice was steel. "Our child needs a mother. I need to know you're safe so I can fight without fear clouding my judgment." He kissed her hard, desperately. "Go, Catherine, please." Catherine ran with the other women and children, her hand pressed to her belly as they climbed the narrow trail to the concealed canyon where the tribe hid their most vulnerable during attacks. Behind her, she heard the first gunshots crack through the cold air, and her heart felt like it would tear itself from her chest. The waiting was agony. Hours passed while they huddled in the cave, the children crying softly, the women praying in whispered Apache. Catherine found herself clutching her mother's locket, whispering prayers in English and Apache both, begging any god who would listen to keep Dakota safe. When the sun began to set and no one had come, fear turned to terror. Catherine stood, ignoring Desba's sharp command to stay. "I have to know," she said simply. "I have to see." "Foolish girl, you will get yourself killed." "Then I'll die knowing." Catherine met the old woman's eyes. "Would you have stayed hidden if it was your husband down there?" Desba's expression softened fractionally. She pressed something into Catherine's hand, a small knife. "Go quietly. Come back quickly. And if you die, I will curse your spirit for making me love you." Catherine crept back down the trail as darkness fell, her heart hammering so hard she thought the soldiers might hear it. The camp came into view, and her breath caught. Wickiups burned, supplies scattered. But the people were gathering, calling to each other, tending wounded. Alive. They were alive. "Catherine!" She spun to find Dakota limping toward her, his leg bleeding, but his eyes bright with relief and fury in equal measure. "What are you doing here? I told you to stay." She launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck, sobbing into his shoulder. "You're alive! Thank God you're alive!" His arms crushed her close, one hand tangling in her hair. "Always. I promised you, didn't I? I will live to love you every day I'm given." He pulled back to look at her, his expression fierce. "But you should not have come back. What if I'd lost you and never known?" Catherine interrupted. "What if our child never saw their father again? What if? She stopped, pressing her hand to her belly, where a sharp pain had suddenly bloomed. Dakota's face went white. The baby? I'm fine. Just the fear. I'm fine. But even as she said it, another cramp seized her, stronger this time. Desba appeared seemingly from nowhere, her gnarled hands pulling Catherine from Dakota's arms. She felt Catherine's belly, looked into her eyes, then spoke rapid Apache that made Dakota curse. What? Catherine gasped through the pain. What's wrong? The baby is trying to come, Dakota said, his voice strangled. Too early, much too early. The next hours were a blur of pain and fear. Desba worked over Catherine with grim determination, using herbs to slow the labor, prayers to strengthen the child, hot stones wrapped in leather to ease the cramping. Dakota held Catherine's hand, his face gray with terror as she cried out. I'm sorry, Catherine sobbed during a brief respite. I shouldn't have run down. I shouldn't have. Hush! His fingers brushed sweat-soaked hair from her face. You did what your heart demanded. I cannot fault you for that. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I need you to fight now, golden hair. I need you to be as brave as you were the day you threw that knife at Harlan. As brave as you were when you found me bleeding. Can you do that? Catherine gripped his hand hard enough to hurt. Together? Always together. He pressed his lips to her forehead. I am here. I will not leave. Fight, my wife. Fight for us. Through that long night, Catherine fought. She fought the pain, fought the fear, fought the darkness that wanted to pull her under. Desba's herbs worked their magic, and slowly, impossibly, the labor stopped. The baby settled, quiet again in her womb. When dawn came, Catherine lay exhausted but alive, Dakota's head resting on her shoulder, his hand still clasped in hers. Desba sat in the corner, her eyes closed in either sleep or prayer. We're still here, Catherine whispered. Dakota raised his head, his eyes red-rimmed and exhausted. You're still here, you and our child. His hand spread across her belly, reverent. You fought, and you won. We fought, Catherine corrected, covering his hand with hers. We won. The cavalry attack had driven the tribe from their winter camp, forcing them to move in the brutal cold. Catherine, still recovering, traveled on a travois pulled by a gentle horse, wrapped in every blanket the tribe could spare. Dakota walked beside her, his injured leg bound but functional, his eyes constantly scanning for danger. 5 months later, as spring painted the desert with wildflowers, Catherine went into labor for real. This time, her body was ready. This time, surrounded by Desba and the other women, with Dakota pacing outside the wickiup like a caged mountain lion. Everything happened as it should. Their son entered the world with a cry that could wake the dead, his small fists waving angrily at the indignity of birth. Desba laughed, a sound Catherine had rarely heard, and placed the squalling infant on Catherine's chest. Strong, the old woman pronounced, like his mother, stubborn, like his father. When Dakota was finally allowed in, he dropped to his knees beside them, his hand shaking as he touched his son's tiny head. Tears streamed down his face unashamedly. A son, he breathed. We have a son. What should we name him? Catherine asked, exhausted but glowing. Dakota considered, his finger tracing the baby's perfect features. Kuruk, he said finally. It means bear, because he will be strong and fierce like the bear, and because his mother is the bravest warrior I know. Kuruk, Catherine repeated, testing the name. Their son turned his head at the sound, and she laughed. I think he approves. That night, with their son sleeping between them in a cradleboard Desba had made, Catherine and Dakota lay awake, marveling at the life they'd created. Do you ever regret it? Dakota asked softly. Staying with me? Giving up your world? Catherine thought of her father's fists, of Harlan's cruelty, of the cage that had been called civilization. Then she looked at the sleeping baby, at the man who'd given her freedom and love in equal measure. I gave up a prison, she said. You gave me the sky. There's no comparison. She shifted closer, feeling his warmth. Do you regret taking me in? I've brought you nothing but trouble with my people. You brought me everything. His hand found hers in the darkness. Hope, joy, purpose, love. He raised their joined hands to his lips. And now a son. How could I regret my entire world? 3 years passed in a rhythm of seasons and struggles. The white world continued its relentless push westward, and the Chiricahua continued their strategic retreats, their raids for supplies, their fight to maintain their way of life. Catherine bore a second son, whom they named Addison, meaning listener, for his quiet, watchful nature, so different from Karuk's boisterous energy. She had become fully Chiricahua now, thinking in Apache as often as English. Her hands skilled at every task, from tanning hides to setting broken bones. The women no longer saw her as an outsider, but as one of them, golden hair who sees far, wife of Dakota, mother of sons, healer and friend. But one spring morning, everything changed. Catherine was washing clothes in the stream, Karuk playing nearby, while Addison dozed in his cradleboard on her back, when she heard the sound, English, spoken with an accent she knew too well. Catherine? Catherine Morgan? She turned slowly, her heart stopping. A woman stood at the stream's edge, perhaps 40 years old, thin and careworn, wearing a simple traveling dress. But her eyes were the same green as the ones Catherine saw in still water. Aunt Mary? The name emerged as barely a whisper. Sweet Lord, it is you. The woman pressed a hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. We thought, your father said you were dead, that savages had killed you. But I heard rumors, stories of a white woman living with the Apache. And I had to know. I had to find you. Catherine stood frozen, her mind reeling. This was her mother's sister, the woman who'd sent letters and gifts until Catherine's father burned them all, declaring Mary a bad influence. The woman who'd tried to take Catherine when her mother died, but been denied by a father who'd wanted to keep his punching bag close. How did you find me? Catherine's voice was steady, but her hands shook. I've been searching for 2 years, asking traders, scouts, anyone who'd talk to me. Mary took a hesitant step forward. Catherine, I've come to take you home, to rescue you from— Rescue? The word came sharp as a blade. Catherine felt Karuk press against her leg, felt Addison stir on her back. Rescue me from what, exactly? Mary's eyes flickered to the children, to Catherine's buckskin dress, to the life so clearly lived. From this, from them. You're a white woman, Catherine. You belong— I belong exactly where I am. Catherine's voice was ice and fire. I'm not a prisoner, Aunt Mary. I'm a wife, a mother. I chose this life. Your father forced you to this. He told me— My father, Catherine interrupted, beat me bloody and tried to force me to marry a monster. I ran away and found freedom. I found love. I found family. She gestured to the camp behind her. This is my home. Mary looked stricken. But the savages! Stop! Catherine's command was sharp. Don't call them that. These people took me in when I had nothing. They taught me, protected me, loved me. They are more civilized than any white community I ever knew. Kuruk tugged on Catherine's dress, speaking in rapid Apache, asking who the strange woman was. Catherine answered in the same language, telling him it was her mother's sister, that everything was fine. Mary's face crumpled. You speak their language. You dress like them. You've even given your children savage names. She reached out imploringly. Catherine, please, come back with me. I have money now. My husband died and left me the farm. I can give you a real life, give your sons education, opportunities. They have opportunities here. They're learning to be strong, to be brave, to honor the earth and respect all life. Catherine's hand found Kuruk's head, stroking his dark hair, so like his father's. They're learning 2 languages, 2 ways of seeing the world. That's more than most white children ever get. But they'll be outcasts, half-breeds that neither world accepts. The words hit like a physical blow, and Catherine saw red. Get out! Catherine, I said get out! Her voice rose, bringing other women to the stream's edge, their expressions wary. You come here with your prejudice and your pity, thinking you can save me? I don't need saving, Aunt Mary. I needed saving 3 years ago when my father was beating me. Where were you then? Mary flinched as if struck. I didn't know. Your father said, my father lied about everything. About me being dead. About how my mother died. Probably about why you stopped writing. Catherine felt tears burning, but refused to let them fall. You want to help me now? Then leave. Forget you found me. Let me live my life in peace. I can't do that. Mary's voice broke. You're my sister's daughter, her only child. I promised her I'd take care of you if anything happened to her. Then honor her memory by respecting my choice. Catherine's voice softened slightly. My mother taught me to be strong, to be kind, to be true to myself. That's what I'm doing here. That's what I'm teaching my sons. Mary stood silent for a long moment, tears running unchecked down her face. Finally, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small package wrapped in cloth. I brought this. It was your mother's. I thought you might want it. Catherine took the package with trembling hands. Inside was a book, a collection of poems, worn and well-loved, with her mother's handwriting in the margins. The sight of it broke something in her, and the tears she'd been holding back spilled over. Thank you, she whispered. Keep it safe. Mary's voice was thick with emotion. Remember where you came from, even if you've chosen a different path. I remember every day. Catherine clutched the book to her chest. I remember her songs, her stories, her love. I'm giving all of that to my children, along with everything their father's people have taught me. They'll be richer for it. Mary nodded slowly, seeming to really see Catherine for the first time. Not as a victim to be rescued, but as a woman who'd built a life on her own terms. Are you happy? She asked finally. Happier than I ever was in the white world. Catherine's hand went to her belly, where a 3rd child was just beginning to make itself known. I have love here, Aunt Mary. Real love. The kind my mother and father should have had, but never did. Then I suppose that's all that matters. Mary wiped her eyes. I'll go, but Catherine, if you ever need me, if things ever become impossible, I'll be at the old homestead, the one your mother grew up in. Will you remember that? I'll remember. Catherine gestured to Kuruk. Come meet your great-nephew at least, before you go." For a few precious minutes, Mary knelt and spoke gently to Karuk, marveling at his bright eyes and quick smile. She touched Aditsan's sleeping face with reverent fingers. And then, with a final embrace that smelled of lavender and old memories, she left. Catherine stood, watching her aunt disappear into the spring morning, the book of poems clutched in one hand, Kuruk's small hand in the other, Aditsan warm against her back. She felt Takoda's presence before she heard him, his arms coming around all of them. "I heard," he said quietly. "Are you well?" "I'm well." Catherine leaned back against his strength. "She wanted to rescue me." "Did you tell her you already saved yourself?" "I told her I chose this life, that I choose you, our sons, our people." She turned in his arms, the children between them. "Did I do the right thing, sending her away?" Takoda's hand cupped her face. "You chose your truth. That is always right." He glanced at the book. "What is that?" "My mother's poetry. Aunt Mary brought it." Catherine opened it carefully, seeing her mother's familiar handwriting, and her throat tightened. "Will you help me read it to our sons? I want them to know their grandmother through her words." "I will." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "We will teach them both legacies, your mother's love of words, my mother's love of the land. They will be rich in heritage." That night, as the fire burned low and the children slept, Catherine read aloud from her mother's book, poems about love and loss, hope and heartbreak, beauty found in unexpected places. Takoda listened, his arm around her shoulders, occasionally asking about a word or phrase. When she closed the book, he said, "Your mother would be proud of you." "You think so?" "I know so. She taught you to be strong, to choose your own path. You've done both." His hand covered hers on the book. "And now you teach our children the same. It is a good legacy, Catherine." Catherine set the book carefully aside and turned to face him fully. "I'm pregnant again." His eyes widened, then crinkled with joy. "Again? So soon? Apparently you're very talented at making babies." She laughed at his expression. "Are you pleased?" "Pleased?" He pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "I am blessed beyond measure. 3 children to love, to teach, to watch grow. And you, always you, at my side through everything." "I want a daughter this time," Catherine confessed. "A daughter to teach all the things Desba taught me. A daughter to give my mother's book to someday." "Then we'll have a daughter." Takoda's certainty made her smile. The spirits have been generous with us. Why would they stop now? And 7 months later, as autumn painted the world in gold and red, their daughter was born, small but fierce, with golden hair like her mother and her grandmother before her. They named her Desba, in honor of the old woman who'd taught Catherine everything, who'd accepted her when acceptance was far from certain, who'd become the grandmother her sons adored. The old Desba, nearly 90 winters old, held her namesake and cried unashamedly. "She will be strong like you," she told Catherine. "She will bridge worlds like you. She will remember me when I'm gone." "We'll all remember you," Catherine promised, though her heart ached at the thought of losing the woman who'd become more mother to her than her own had been able to be. 6 months later, old Desba passed peacefully in her sleep. The tribe mourned deeply, and Catherine felt the loss like a physical wound. But when she looked at her daughter, bright-eyed and curious, reaching for everything with fearless hands, she saw the old woman's spirit living on. "She gave me more than knowledge," Catherine told Takoda the night after Desba's burial ceremony. She gave me permission to be myself, to be both Catherine and Chirikawa, to not have to choose. And now you give that same gift to our children. Takoda's arms encircled her and their daughter both. They will never have to choose between their heritages. They will claim both with pride. Will it be enough? Catherine's fear surfaced. When the white world keeps pushing, when the soldiers keep coming, when we'll face it together. The words were their old promise, worn smooth by repetition, but no less true. Whatever comes, Catherine, we face it together. The next years brought both joy and sorrow in equal measure. The white encroachment intensified, forcing the tribe into smaller territories, making traditional hunting grounds increasingly dangerous. Catherine used her knowledge of both worlds to help negotiate for supplies, to translate when needed, to bridge the gap between her adopted people and the inevitable tide of change. She bore 2 more children, another son, Yas, Snow, born during a winter storm, and finally another daughter, Isi, Deer, as gentle and graceful as her name suggested. 5 children, each beautiful, each strong, each carrying both worlds in their blood and in their hearts. Kuruk, now 10, was already showing signs of becoming a warrior like his father. Brave, skilled with bow and rifle both, protective of his younger siblings. But he also showed Catherine's gift for words, telling stories that kept the younger children enthralled. Addison, 8, was the quiet thinker, watching everything with thoughtful eyes, asking questions that made even the elders pause to consider their answers. He loved Catherine's mother's poetry book, learning to read English alongside Apache, hungry for both languages. Thesba, 6, was exactly like her namesake, fierce, stubborn, determined to master every skill her mother or father could teach her. She could ride before she could walk steadily, could track a rabbit through dead grass, could argue eloquently in 2 languages. Yaz, 4, was pure joy, always laughing, always playing, finding happiness in everything from mud puddles to butterfly wings. He kept the family spirits high even during the hardest times. And little Issy, barely 2, was the baby who'd somehow remained the baby even as she grew, sweet-natured and loving, content to sit in her mother's lap and watch the world unfold around her. How did we get so blessed? Takoda asked one evening as they sat outside their wickiup, watching their children play in the fading light. We fought for it, Catherine answered, simply. Every day, we fought for this life, for this love, for them. She leaned against his shoulder. And we keep fighting, always. His arm came around her, solid and sure. Until my last breath, I fight for this family. But the fight became harder with each passing season. Soldiers came more frequently. Food became scarcer. The tribe dwindled as some surrendered to reservation life, unable to continue the constant flight and struggle. One autumn morning, Takoda returned from a scouting expedition with a grim expression that Catherine had learned to dread. "Tell me," she said simply. "The cavalry is coming. A large force, with Apache scouts helping them track us." His jaw was tight with betrayal at the thought of their own people aiding the soldiers. "Kele says we have perhaps 3 days to move the camp. Where will we go?" Catherine's mind was already racing. Supplies to pack, children to prepare, the elderly and sick to consider. "South, deeper into Mexico. It's our last option." He pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. "Catherine, I need you to consider something." "No." She knew immediately what he would say. "Whatever you're thinking, the answer is no." You could take the children. Go to your aunt. They would be safe. Without you? Catherine pulled back to look at him. Without their father, their people, their heritage. That's not safety, Dakota. That's exile. But they would live. They would have opportunities. They would be torn in half. Catherine's hands cupped his face, forcing him to meet her eyes. They're Shirakawa, Dakota. Apache first, in their hearts, in their spirits. Taking them from that would destroy something essential in them, in me. Even if staying means they might die, we're all going to die someday. Catherine's voice was fierce now. The question is whether we die living as ourselves, or whether we die slowly, piece by piece, trying to be something we're not. She pressed her forehead to his. I chose this life. I choose it still. I choose it for them. We stay together, or we fall together. Dakota's arms crushed her close, his breath ragged against her neck. I love you. I love you so much it frightens me. I know. I feel the same. She pulled back just enough to smile at him, though tears streamed down her face. That's why we fight. That's why we keep going. Love is worth fighting for. The tribe moved south, a desperate migration under increasingly dangerous conditions. Catherine walked with the other women, little Issy strapped to her back, Yas holding tightly to her hand. The older children ranging ahead with Dakota and the other warriors, ever watchful. They were 3 days into Mexico when the soldiers caught them. The attack came at dawn, sudden and overwhelming. Catherine grabbed Issy and Yas, screaming for the older children as chaos erupted around her. She saw Dakota fighting, saw Karuk, too young, still too young, with a rifle in his hands, saw Aditsen pulling Desba toward the rocks where they'd practiced hiding. Run! Dakota's voice cut through the gunfire. Catherine, take them and run! But Catherine had learned long ago that running wasn't always the answer. She pushed Issy and Yaz into the arms of another woman fleeing, then ran not away, but toward her oldest children. Kuruk, Aditsan, Desba. Her voice was hoarse with fear. Get to the canyon, now! Kuruk turned, his young face set with impossible maturity. Mother, you have to. A bullet cracked past them. So close, Catherine felt the wind of it. Without thinking, she threw herself at her children, covering them with her body as more shots rang out. Then Dakota was there, his large frame shielding all of them, his rifle firing methodically, buying them seconds that felt like lifetimes. Go, he roared. Take our children and go. I will follow. Catherine grabbed Kuruk and Aditsan's hands, gestured frantically to Desba. Your father says we go, so we go. Now. They ran. Behind them, Dakota and the other warriors held the line, giving the women and children precious time to escape into the maze of canyons they knew intimately. Catherine ran until her lungs burned, until her legs screamed, until her children stumbled and she half carried, half dragged them forward. They found shelter in a narrow cave, pressing back into the shadows. Catherine pulled her children close, covering their mouths to muffle their terrified breathing, her own heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst. Footsteps past the cave entrance, voices in English calling to each other, searching. Catherine held her children tighter, willing them to silence, to stillness, to survival. Hours passed. The footsteps faded. The voices grew distant. Finally, as the sun set, painting the canyon in blood-red light, Catherine heard the call she'd been desperately hoping for. Dakota's owl signal, the one they'd used for years to find each other. She returned it, her voice shaking. and within minutes he appeared at the cave entrance, bloodied, limping, but alive. "Papa!" Kuruk launched himself at his father, followed immediately by Aditsan and Desba. Dakota caught them all, his face crumpling with relief. "You're alive," Catherine breathed, moving to join the embrace. "You're alive. Always." His hand found hers, gripping tight enough to hurt. "I promised you. Until my last breath, I fight for this family." They stayed in that cave through the night, holding each other, whispering prayers of thanksgiving to gods of both their peoples. And when morning came, they emerged to find a scattered tribe, many dead, many captured, but some, like them, surviving still. Kelly found them at midday, his weathered face grim but resolute. He spoke in Apache, and Dakota translated for the children who'd all fallen silent, traumatized by the violence they'd witnessed. "He says we're done running. He says it's time to surrender, to go to the reservation. It's the only way to keep the children safe." "No." Kuruk's voice cracked on the word. "We're Kirikawa. We don't surrender." "We're also human," Catherine said softly, pulling her son close. "And humans do what they must to survive." She looked at Dakota, seeing the agony of the decision in his eyes. "Can you live with it? The reservation life?" "Can you?" he countered. "They'll try to make the children go to their schools to forget Apache ways. They'll cut Kuruk and Aditsan's hair. They'll try to make them white. Then we teach them at night. We keep our language, our stories, our truth alive in secret." Catherine's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "We survive. We adapt. We endure. That's what you taught me, Dakota. That's what we'll teach them." Dakota studied her, this golden-haired woman who'd transformed from terrified runaway to fierce Chiricahua mother, who'd fought alongside him for 15 years, who'd borne his children and built a life in the spaces between two worlds. "You're sure?" he asked. "I'm sure." She took his hand and placed it over her heart, so he could feel it, beating strong and steady. "We've survived beatings and bullets, cavalry and childbirth, winter storms and summer droughts. We'll survive this too, together." "Together," he echoed, and the word was both prayer and promise. The reservation years were hard in ways Catherine had never imagined. Not the physical hardship. They'd endured worse in the desert. But the slow, grinding erosion of identity. The constant battle to keep their children Chiricahua in a world determined to make them into something else. Kuruk and Aditsan were forced into the boarding school for a year, their beautiful long hair shorn, their names changed to Charles and Adam. They came home silent, traumatized, something broken in their eyes that took months to heal. But Catherine and Dakota rebuilt them, piece by piece. Every night, they spoke Apache. Every chance they got, they taught traditional skills in secret. Every moment possible, they reminded their children who they were and where they came from. "You are Chiricahua," Catherine would whisper as she tucked them in. "You are the son of Dakota, grandson of warriors and wise women. You are the great-grandson of my mother, who loved poetry and beauty. You carry both worlds in your blood, and both worlds make you strong. Never forget that." Desba, fierce as her namesake, refused to go to the school. She hid so effectively that even the agents gave up trying to find her. Catherine taught her to read and write English herself, using her mother's poetry book, while Dakota taught her to track and hunt in the scattered moments when the agents weren't watching. Yas and little Isi were too young yet for the schools. But Catherine knew their time would come. She made sure every day counted, filling them with stories and songs and truths that no school could erase. Life on the reservation was a strange liminal space, neither free nor entirely captive, neither Apache nor white, but some uncomfortable hybrid of both. Catherine, with her golden hair and English fluency, often served as translator and mediator, using her unique position to help her people navigate the bureaucratic nightmare of agency life. It was during one of these translations, 5 years into reservation life, that Catherine saw a familiar figure standing in the agency office. Older, grayer, but unmistakably her Aunt Mary. "Catherine!" Mary's voice shook. "I heard about the surrender. I came to help if I can." They talked for hours that day, bridging 15 years of absence. Mary apologized for believing the worst, for not searching harder when Catherine had run, for not understanding until it was too late. Catherine, worn down by reservation hardships, but still fierce in her love for her family, found room in her heart to forgive. "Can I meet them?" Mary asked finally. "Your children? My great-niece and great-nephews?" Catherine hesitated, old protective instincts rising. But then she thought of her mother, of the poetry book, of the heritage her children deserved to know in its fullness. "Yes," she said, "but you must understand, they're Apache. That's not going to change." "I'm not here to change them." Mary's voice was firm. "I'm here to know them, to be family, if they'll have me." The children were wary at first, Karuk especially, now 15 and protective of his family, suspicious of all white people after the boarding school trauma. But Mary came bearing gifts that showed she'd listened, she'd learned. Beadwork supplies for Desba, books in English and Spanish for Aditzin, a rifle for Karuk that actually worked, unlike the broken ones the agency provided, a beautiful doll for Issy, and a toy horse for Yaz. And for Catherine, she brought news. Their father was dead, drinking himself to death 3 years past. The farm was gone, sold for debts. But Mary's own homestead was thriving, and she wanted Catherine to know, if they ever needed refuge, if the reservation became impossible, she had land and space and a place for them. "I can't offer you your old life back," Mary said as she prepared to leave, weeks later. "That's gone, and frankly, it wasn't worth having. But I can offer you safety, if you ever need it. For you, for Dakota, for all the children. They're my family too, Catherine. Finally, I understand that." Catherine embraced her aunt for a long moment. "Thank you, for coming, for understanding, for seeing us as we are, not as you wish we were." "That's what family should do," Mary said simply. "Love without conditions, accept without judgment." After Mary left, Dakota held Catherine close under the stars, the same stars they'd watched together for 17 years now. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "Staying with me? If you'd gone with your aunt that first time, you'd have had an easier life." Catherine laughed softly. "Easier, maybe. Better, never." She turned to look at him, this man who'd been warrior and husband and father, who'd taught her strength and gentleness both, who'd given her a life worth living. "I told you once, you gave me the sky. Everything else is just details." Even the reservation, the hardship, the fear, even that. She pressed her hand over his heart, feeling its steady beat. "I'd choose this life, choose you, 1,000 times over. In any world, in any time, I'd choose you." His kiss was soft, reverent, tasting of promises kept and love sustained through every storm. My golden hair, my Catherine, my brave, fierce, impossible woman. How did I deserve you? You didn't. Catherine grinned against his lips. But you got me anyway, and you're never getting rid of me now. Good. His arms tightened around her. Because I plan to love you for at least another 50 years. Only 50? She laughed. I was hoping for 60 at least. Greedy woman. You're a greedy woman. Mine, he agreed. Always mine, as I am always yours. 20 years after Catherine first found Dakota bleeding in the sagebrush, they sat together outside their small reservation house. Not a wiki-up anymore, but they'd made it home anyway, and watched their grown children living lives they'd fought so hard to preserve. Kuruk, 25, had married an Apache woman, and was working as a translator, using his understanding of both worlds to help his people. He'd named his first son Dakota, honoring the grandfather who taught him to be proud of his heritage. Aditson, 23, had become a teacher, running secret classes in Apache language and culture, keeping the old ways alive for a new generation. He'd taken his great-grandmother's poetry book and added to it, writing in both English and Apache, creating a new legacy. Desba, 21, was everything her namesake had been: fierce, skilled, refusing to conform. She'd married a warrior who'd also refused to be broken by reservation life, and together they were raising their daughter to be Chiricahua first and American second. Yas, 19, worked with horses, his joy and gentleness making him a natural trainer. He talked of starting a ranch someday, of raising horses that could survive the desert, of building something lasting. And Isi, 17, was the beauty of the family, gentle and graceful, but with a core of strength she'd inherited from both parents. She helped Catherine with healing, learning the old medicines Desba had taught, blending Apache knowledge with what white doctors knew, creating something new and powerful. We did it, Catherine said softly. They survived. They're thriving. You did it, Dakota corrected. You bridged the worlds for them. You taught them they could be both Apache and part of the wider world, that they didn't have to choose. We did it together. Catherine's correction was gentle but firm. Everything we've done together. Dakota pulled her close, and they sat in comfortable silence as the sun set in shades of orange and gold, the same colors that had painted the sky the night they met, that had witnessed every joy and sorrow of their life together. I'm a stranger here, Catherine said suddenly, echoing those words from so long ago. But this time, she was smiling. Dakota knew what she wanted. He always did. His hand cupped her face, and he said the words that had changed everything. You belong in my arms, and nowhere else. Still? She asked, though she knew the answer. Always. His kiss was soft, sure, full of 20 years of love, and all the years yet to come. From that first moment, I opened my eyes and saw you. Determined, brave, beautiful. I knew you belonged with me. Time hasn't changed that. Nothing ever will. Good, Catherine whispered, settling into his embrace. Because I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me, Dakota. For better or worse, through everything, until the very end. The very end is a long time away, he murmured. We have years yet, years to watch our grandchildren grow, years to love each other, years to prove that two worlds can become one, if the hearts choosing it are brave enough. Catherine looked at their children, at the grandchildren playing nearby, at the life they'd built from nothing but courage and love. We proved it, she said. We're living proof. And our children, our grandchildren, they'll carry that proof forward into whatever future comes. Together, Dakota asked, the word that had always been their promise. Together, Catherine answered. Now and always. In this world and the next. Together. And as the stars emerged one by one above the reservation, bearing witness as they had for 2 decades, Catherine and Dakota sat wrapped in each other's arms, belonging to each other and nowhere else, exactly as they always had, exactly as they always would. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Catherine and Dakota's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.